Welcome to the Sleep Dives channel. We are analyzing the introductory synopsis of James Clear's 2018 text, Atomic Habits. By February 2024, the book had sold nearly 20 million copies and held a position on the New York Times bestseller list for 260 weeks. This sustained commercial performance reflects a massive, systemic societal demand for behavioral modification. Yet, despite the presence of high personal motivation and public interest, the majority of individuals who attempt to permanently alter negative behaviors fail to do so. Individual motivation does not drive this high failure rate. Instead, it results from a reliance on a structurally flawed willpower model rather than an optimized systems model. To understand the mechanics of change, we will deconstruct behavioral feedback loops, dismantle the willpower model, and analyze the mathematics behind marginal behavioral gains. Treating habits as an engineering problem rather than a moral trial allows professionals to reliably architect personal growth. The standard assumption regarding behavioral failure is that succumbing to procrastination or addiction reveals an inherent deficit, a flaw in the you. Clear identifies the true driver of negative behavior as your system, a network of previously self-imposed mental barriers. These two models possess different energy requirements. A willpower-based model relies on a depleting resource, whereas a system-based model utilizes passive constraints. An unoptimized system acts as a structural barrier, actively preventing the growth required to terminate a negative cycle. This same systemic friction prevents individuals from displaying positive habitual behaviors, even when motivation is high. Because a system cannot be overpowered, it must be systematically broken down and restructured over time. This architectural approach removes emotional volatility from the process, turning habit change into an objective, mechanical procedure. Viewing habit failure as a structural problem turns it into a predictable result of systemic friction. At the micro level, all habits are governed by a rigid, four-stage neurological sequence. The first stage is the cue, the environmental trigger. The second stage is the craving, the internal drive. The third stage is the response, the mechanical action. The final stage is the reward, reinforcing the cycle. Clear grounds this framework with a universal example: entering a dark room. Darkness acts as the cue. The craving is better vision. The response is flipping the switch. The reward is visual clarity. This hardwires the brain to repeat the action when it next encounters darkness. Identifying these four precise variables is the absolute mandatory prerequisite for modification. An unmapped loop cannot be disrupted. The bottleneck of this loop occurs during the response phase. The exertion required here is precisely where willpower usually fails. This graph represents the solution to that bottleneck, the 1% rule. By improving 1% each day, the individual exponentially increases their capacity. This is achieved through an atomic habit, a behavior engineered to require minimal exertion. Because they require almost zero willpower to execute, these atomic habits easily bypass the mental barriers within the existing system. Executing these low-exertion routines consistently expands the individual's baseline operational capacity. This expanded baseline eventually provides the capacity to execute larger, complex behavioral patterns automatically. This strategy avoids the standard failure mode of attempting massive changes before the baseline capacity has been built. The 1% rule acts as a strict mathematical requirement for scaling behavioral capacity without triggering a systemic collapse. Applying these principles allows for the active dismantling of a negative habit. The first diagnostic step requires the user to forensically map the negative behavior to the four-step deterministic loop. To break the cycle, the user must isolate the cue and physically disrupt the response by altering the immediate physical environment. Constructing a new habit requires engineering the desired response so that the required physical and cognitive exertion is atomic. Attempting a full systemic overhaul through sheer force of will on day one is a common professional error. Willpower will predictably fail if the underlying mental barriers of the existing system remain intact. Behavioral change is a process of environmental sabotage against bad habits and environmental enablement for positive ones. Willpower is a finite and volatile resource. Systemic architecture is sustainable. By removing the moral rate of failure, a professional can troubleshoot their routines like an engineer examining a machine. The 4-step deterministic loop isolates the variables, while the 1% atomic rule provides the mechanism for scaling. Mastering complex behavioral shifts does not require massive, exhausting effort.